Yeah, let the big dog hunt. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Kallas Remarks with Joe Stazak, Steve Kallas. This is the March Madness 2026 edition, aka Complete Chaos. We're going to try to do our best to keep everything straight today because a lot has gone on over the first 2 days. Stephen, how you doing, my friend?
All good, Joe. Great to be with you as always.
So here we are, a little bit of craziness as usual, and that's what I think the is the attractiveness of March Madness. Let's start with High Point, the biggest upset of the tournament so far. They beat Wisconsin by a point. I think the greatest thing about the tournament is it leaves you wondering where is that school located? Like, who are they? High Point. They're in North Carolina, by the way. A factory for basketball programs, unless you're the Tar Heels and get knocked out in the first round every year. So let's start with High Point. What did you think of that? Because Wisconsin's a pretty good team, hailing from the Big Ten. But High Point, 30 and 4 this year coming into the game. I think no one gave them a chance except them. And they came out with a victory and they move on.
Well, they got a fascinating coach named Flynn Clayman, and
Who doesn't
after the
know him?
game, after the game, even on the court, and then later in the post game press conference, all he was talking about, and I think correctly, it's interesting because he said a team like High Point, he said we can't get anybody in D1 to play us. The tough guys, the big guys, they won't play us. Um, if we had some home games, and he also mentioned Miami of Ohio, who we'll get to later because they did beat SMU, but they got blown out by Tennessee, and that to me is the difference between those teams and the big, SEC teams and all those teams. But they have a guy named Chase Johnston who scored the game-winning layup. I don't know if you saw, well, the very last play of the game, it was like um, High Point was up one, and Wisconsin has a guard named Nick Boyd who was fantastic. And he had missed kind of a drive to the basket. And then he would also miss a shot at the buzzer, although actually it was blocked, a shot at the buzzer. But what what happened was, and this is, I wish somebody would talk about this. You're up one. It's very late in the game. You're on offense going to the basket, but you're winning. And what happens? I looked, you had four guys from Wisconsin when the shot went up, and it was close to a layup. It was a drive to the basket. You had four guys on Wisconsin within 8 feet of that basket, maybe 10 feet of that basket, not close to the foul line. You had four or five guys. So when the ball got batted around a little bit and it wound up in the hands of Rob Martin, who's their star, um, he threw it ahead to Chase Johnston, who hadn't scored a 2-point basket all year. So you think, well, what is this guy no good or what? He was 0 for 4 from 2 points for the season, but he was 64 of 132 for threes. That's 48.5%, Joe. So
Big
this
time. He
guy's
should have pulled
obviously,
up. He would have a better percentage chance of
but
pulling up.
so he was the guy who was ahead of the field and got the pass and scored an easy layup to essentially win the game. Nick Boyd came back and again went to the basket and got blocked. But it's like intro to basketball. You got to come back. You're winning. You're winning the game. So why are you going underneath trying to get a rebound? You should have had two or three guys back. The one guy who was back got caught flat-footed at maybe the top of the key and Johnston was literally 6, 8 feet in front of him. There was no way anybody was going to catch him. So he lays it in. They go back the other way. Nick Boyd goes to the basket, gets it. I mean, I saw Wisconsin beat Illinois. I mean, Wisconsin's really good, and I think that team, the Big Ten and the Big 12 are two of the best teams. The SEC, it's round up the usual suspects. But High Point had a heck of a game, and Johnston was, he hits threes and he made his first two of the year, which I thought was hysterical. But again, you wish somebody would show the final, I think it was like final 15 seconds or something, where their star, Nick Boyd, goes to the basket. And why would four of your five players be looking for the rebound? You're winning by one late in the game. And the ball did get batted around right into the hands, frankly, of Rob Martin, who threw it ahead to a wide open Johnston. I don't know if he was cherry picking, how some guys cheat like that. And maybe that's what he was doing. It was genius because he scored the layup that turned out to be the winning basket. And then they had one more chance, Wisconsin, and they just couldn't do it. But I like the stuff the coach was saying because I think he's right. You don't want to play these D1 teams you never heard of, especially if they're good. And now High Point is obviously good. But it was interesting because Charles Barkley, I don't know about Charles Barkley doing college basketball. I mean, I don't know. You know, that show on the NBA my son loves, but it's a good show for the NBA, but Charles Barkley shows up and what, he's going to handicap 48 games? No, but he said, "Oh, I love the coach. I love the coach at High Point. I think I have 1 year of eligibility left. I want to play for him." And then they wound up interviewing the coach on ESPN. I think it was last night. Maybe they had him on, and it's his first year coaching High Point. But I think he's right. I think he makes a good point. You don't want to play if you're a big school. You don't want to play a D1 team that's not in your bracket, that's not in your league until what? Unless you can crush them. You don't usually play, and most coaches
It's
won't
the
play real close.
unknowns. There's a lot of good teams out there, especially they play different styles you're not used to, and you don't have a lot of intel on them except watching tape. It's a different game. I mean, you can be a very good team, but really it doesn't matter. You have to be very good that day. That's all. If you're not very good that day, you're out.
Oh, and just for the record, Chase Johnston, real good 3-point shooter, was 4 for 7 from three.
So he's
He
more
hit
than
the
fifty
layup.
percent. Yeah, he was.
He hit the layup to win the game. So, I mean, that's a
Well,
game. You and me.
congratulations to High Point.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Duke and Siena. Now, Duke's the number one seed in the East. Siena gave them a run. Now, there were a lot of teams, Arizona, Michigan, Florida, Houston, that really took care of business in their opening rounds, the one seeds versus the 16s. And then you'll see a game that could get, a little squirrely, and Duke had one of those games. But they ended up winning. But you have some things to say about.
Oh, I think Duke is the luckiest team in America because Siena always has a good team. They don't play in the greatest league, but they always have a good team. And Jerry McNamara is their
Jerry
coach.
McNamara. I
They
love when
put
you see these coaches pop up. Didn't he hit like 9 threes in a championship game a few years ago and took Syracuse to? Yeah, he was a great,
Jerry
great player
McNamara.
at Syracuse.
He was on the team. He was young. He was on the team with Carmelo when Boeheim won his only national championship there. But then when he was a
2003.
senior, I think it was in 2006, he was 2005, 6, he was a senior.
It's
He had
2006. Yep.
arguably the greatest Big East tournament in the history of the world. Maybe one of those guys from UConn had a better one of those years. But he was just unbelievable. Couldn't quite make it to the NBA. Went all over the world trying to play. He went to camps, but he always got cut. But now he's the coach of Siena, and here's the problem as I see it, because you could even tell if you watch that game. Now I watched the whole second half because you turn it on like late in the first half, and you're like, "Wow, these guys are up 10." And they were up 11 at the half, and I think they even went up a little more. But Siena only played 5 guys. They put in a substitute with 8 seconds left in the
They
game.
shortened their bench.
I think, well, and what I saw in some timeouts, now I think if you play for Siena and you're not in that top five, they played every minute, the whole game, all of them, except for 8 seconds at the end. One guy came in to foul and didn't even give a foul. But if they had a guy, and this must be terrible, the drop off from 5 to 6 has to be humongous because he never put another guy in. If you had one guy who could play 10 minutes, and I swear, maybe I'm wrong, but I swear when they showed some timeouts, you had a couple of guys in the background who looked livid that they weren't playing, even for a little bit. Now, if you could have given these guys a blow 2, 3 minutes, it could have been a different game because, you know, you're watching Sports Center again. Oh, they were so dominant in the second half. They did this, they did that. If you're watching the game, these guys are rigging their hands on their shorts and all that, 5 or 7 minutes into the second half. Yet they never came out. They gave him a great run. They got a guy named Gavin Doty, who's a real good player who got hurt twice. I think he was the star of their team. He had 21, but I think he's the star of their team. And he was playing half limping, doing everything he could, but they never were able to put in a substitute. I don't know if Jerry McNamara was asked about that afterwards because what he needs is depth. And if he had any depth, in my opinion, Joe, if he had any depth, if he had one guy who could have given 3 or 4 guys a 3 or 4 minute blow, they would have won that game. So I think Duke is lucky, and they go, "Oh, Duke came back." And a guy at halftime even said, I forget which player it was. They interviewed him at halftime. He said, "Oh, we thought this was going to be a cakewalk." Well, come on now. A, you play for Duke. Everyone's trying to give you your best shot.
Yeah, you don't want to say
B,
those. Yeah.
right. B, there's really a cakewalk. There are cakewalks, but there's really a cakewalk, and you should never really think that way, which is kind of weird. But I give Jerry McNamara credit just to give them a run. But again, I guess he had nobody. I couldn't find an interview with him. And maybe he was so angry he didn't give an interview. But if they had one guy, I think they could have won the game. But these guys were all so tired by the end. I watched the end of the first half and all of the second half. At the beginning of the second half, now I think they went up 13. Then there was one play where they had two guys to dunk the ball and they couldn't dunk it. Not they weren't blocked or anything. They had two dunks and missed it. Later on, a few minutes later, this is all at the beginning of the second half when Duke is making their comeback. There was one play where they got three offensive rebounds on one play and missed three shots within 5 feet of the basket. And they also had a couple that roll in and out. You could tell me that's the luck of the game and all that. But boy, did they have some chances. And I'll say it again. I don't think you like credit Duke with a big comeback or anything. I think you say they're incredibly lucky because what team? I think they said it hasn't happened in like 8 or 10 years where one team played their five guys for the whole. I thought I wrote it down. I wish I had it here, but I don't think I do. But they were so tired. Nobody really focused. Well, a little bit the announcers, but they didn't really focus on how exhausted you are in one of these games if you all go 40 minutes. I mean, to go 40 minutes in a college game of that magnitude, you're playing the best team. You're playing arguably the best team in the country, and you got them on the ropes, but I thought they just ran out of gas. And I thought that's why, again, they got the Boozer brothers, so they're real good. And maybe they can make a run now, but I was looking at their bracket. I think TCU can beat them.
Well, TCU is coming off. A lot of the 8-9 games went the way of the nines, and Ohio State um, was an 8 seed. They lost by 2 to TCU, who always has a shot, who always plays hard in these tournaments, and they moved on. Now Duke's got to face them, But you never know from game to game if momentum's going to carry you, or maybe Duke will wake up. But that's why Duke's do. It's about survive in advance. You know what I mean? Like I heard.
No, you're right. You're right. I just thought there could have been a much better analysis on why Duke won. It wasn't some kind of incredible Duke down by 13 comes back to win it. It
Yeah.
was like, man, we're lucky they don't have one substitute.
They out attritioned a lesser team because they have more, depth, pretty much. I mean, and give credit to Siena for hanging in there as long as they did. But that is rare that one guy played 8 seconds outside of the starting five. That's pretty rare. So there must be a pretty big drop off, and you got to kind of like defer to the coach. He kind of knows what's up. Don't you think? But I could see where guys were like, just to give. Look, no one likes when Joel Embiid comes out and the Sixers are like a minus 13 in 4 minutes. You know what I mean? But you got to give some guys a blow. But
Let me give you one final thing on this. Duke was the first number one seed to trail a 16 seed by double digits at halftime since they've had 16 seeds. I mean, come on now.
it's amazing.
So
I
I
mean,
think
yeah, they woke up a little bit again.
everybody says, oh, if you want to win the national championship, you have to have one of these close games and blah blah
You
blah.
don't
But
have to, but a lot of times you do. And again, you kind of if you can get by them, and the teams that win titles often do. I mean, there's some teams like UConn that won by 17 points every game a few years ago, the first of their back-to-backs. But there are some times that you'll not play your best, and the other team gives you their best shot, and you'll end up squeaking by. Maybe because you're that much better, maybe because the other team's not quite as good or doesn't have much depth. And sometimes you end up, getting asked to leave the dance floor. But that's why it's kind of a crazy tournament. It's unforgiving. It's winning.
I'll say after watching that game, I'd be shocked if Duke wins it all.
I'm going to be shocked if they win it all anyway. They never seem to anymore. But we'll see. How about UConn? UConn facing the Furman Paladins. Paladins? Am I saying? Do you even know what a Paladin is?
No.
Yeah, it's one of the knights from Charlemagne's crew. Like 1,500 years ago. Like I wouldn't have known that. I had to look that up. But anyway, they won by 11. They're not too impressive. What do you think of Bobby Hurley's team this year? They lost in the Big East tournament, and they lost a game before that. So they're not playing the best basketball, but they're UConn, and They have certainly they have the weapons to do it. Can they make a run at a title this year?
Well, I was surprised. I think they can make a run, but I was surprised that UConn was a two and St. John's was a five. When I think St. John's beat them now. Now UConn killed them in stores, but I think St. John's beat them
Who killed them in
second
the Big
time they
East
met,
tournament?
and then they beat them in the Big East tournament. So I'm surprised at that. I think St. John's can make a run, but I think UConn can always make a run. And their big man Reed Jr., he had 31 points and 27 rebounds against Furman. And the last to do that, you'll love this one, but I know it wasn't against UCLA. The last to go 30 or more points and 25 or more rebounds was Elvin Hayes in 1968. I know he was playing for Houston then, right? He was playing for Houston.
Yeah.
But and that might have been, let me see, the Kareem year, 65, 66, he was a freshman, 67. Yeah, so he was a junior. But that it was that one year when Elvin Hayes beat him, and it was like the biggest one in the history of the world. But Kareem got his punched in or something. He couldn't really see well. Something happened. And then they played in the tournament, and the only question was UCLA going to win by 20 or 30? And I think they won by like 28 or something. But do I think UConn can make a run? I do think they can make a run. I don't think they're going to win. But it's interesting because the Big East wasn't viewed to be anything, and I think St. John's can make a run, and I think they're every bit as good as UConn is. But UConn now has the big rep. All St. John's has is Patino. If they make a run now, they might get to that level where they get the benefit of the doubt, for lack of a better term, because I don't know that UConn was a number two. They didn't win the regular season. They didn't win their tournament.
North Carolina. All right, there's another team that seems like it's all or nothing with them. Three times under Roy Williams and three times under current coach Hubert Davis, they've gone out in the first round. Think about that. With their teams, with Roy Williams and Hubert Davis, at six times combined out in the first round. This was another one. Remember, they played for a national title a few years ago and had a 15-point lead over Kansas at halftime in the title game. Lost that. They had beaten Duke in the semifinals pretty handily. They lost to VCU, coached by Phil Martelli Jr., and they lost by four, and they're out.
Uh, Everybody likes Hubert Davis. He played great in North Carolina. He was a good NBA player, played for the Knicks, but he got handed the team his first year and they got beat, as you just said, they got beat in the finals by Kansas. But since then, it's been slim pickings for him and for North Carolina. I don't know when the last time, and I don't recall them saying anything, but I don't know when the last time North Carolina got knocked out in the first round 2 years in a row, and that's what's happened to him. And he was very thoughtful, I thought, after the game, but I just went online, and of course there are North Carolina fans calling for his head,
Of course.
and they were up 19 in the second half in this game,
That to
and
me is the most amazing part. Being up that
it,
much and losing.
it's the biggest comeback in the tournament since 2018. So that's, 8 years of the tournament. So I think they're in trouble. And interestingly, because I had told Johnny, because Illinois, who won their game easily, but Illinois was playing the winner of North Carolina VCU. And I said, I don't know that much about VCU, but they can definitely beat North Carolina. And now VCU winds up winning. So you never know with a wild card. They have this Terrence Hill Jr. off the bench. He had 34 points. 5 rebounds, 5 assists. And Phil Martelli, he's got that, his dad, St. Joseph's blood in him. So I think they're a possibility. I think it's going to be a tough game for Illinois. I got Illinois going to the Final Four, but, like picking the Patriots in the Super Bowl, that's with my heart, not with my head, because my son's working out there. He's been to a few games. They got 50,000 kids on campus. It's a huge school. But VCU is a factor now, it seems to me. But it was once again more about the North Carolina collapse, in my opinion, than the VCU comeback. That was an overtime game, as you know. But North Carolina's 0-6 in overtime. I mean,
Yeah,
they were
you
0
wonder
for, I'm
why.
sorry, they were 0 for 9 from the field in overtime, 0 for 6, um, and 4 for 9 from free throws. They didn't score a basket
And
in
four for
overtime.
nine. That's not good shooting.
Right. So I think I don't know if Hubert Davis is in trouble. The problem with hiring all these ex-stars of your school is it's hard to fire those guys. It's just
Yeah, I mean, and of course everyone's going to call for his head. You know, it's
and I
tournaments, man.
heard
Tournaments, everything. No one cares about the regular season once you get in the tournament. It's all about what you do in the tournament and how many rings you collect and how many deep runs. That's not a deep run.
and
Won it
I
out three times. Roy Williams had the same fate. You know, you think about
well,
it.
let's look. You're following Dean Smith, or
Yeah,
following Coach K.
well, I think so for Gazy anyway. But anyway,
They
you know,
even said
Freddie
when you
Brown
followed
and the whole
when you
timeout.
when John Wooden retired, when you followed John Wooden, you didn't want to be the guy to follow John Wooden. You want to be the guy after the
The
guy.
next guy, of course. You always want to be the next guy. Hey, Villanova, and this isn't because it was my squad that got bounced, but Utah State, keep an eye on them. The 9 seed being an 8 seed. Villanova lost by 10. They were up 10 with 15 minutes left. That's a 20-point swing. They did have a complete meltdown in the last 3 minutes. Uncharacteristic of a Villanova team, although this is the Kevin Willard administration. First time they've been in the tournament since Jay. They went to the Final Four where they knocked off Houston and a couple years ago. So rough loss for Nova afterwards. Another rough press conference for Kevin Willard. He made a joke at halftime about firing his staff because they gave up a lot of points in the paint and kind of made another reference to it. He doesn't smile a whole lot either, so you don't know when he's joking. And that kind of went sideways. Even worse than last year when he got bounced as the Maryland coach, and there was talk behind the scenes about, you know, who's working him for a new contract and if is he getting out of Dodge at Maryland. It was a little surreal, but that Utah State team's pretty good. You know, they hung in there. They were down 10 with 15 minutes left. 2 minutes later, it was tied. Like they were explosive, and they were
Yeah.
coached very well.
I don't know if Kevin Willard complained about this. I know he said it was a joke, and it clearly, I mean, if you're watching at halftime, he said, he actually said, I'm going to fire my staff and get a new staff, like right now. So you knew it was a joke, but one of the reporters, I think, was talking to him like it was serious afterwards, and, he couldn't believe it. But I will say this, because this was so uneven. Villanova,
Free
six for
throws.
13 from the foul line, which is terrible, but only 13. And Utah State 28 for 36. So where did they win the game? That's where they won the game.
But they also Nova was over 50% from three. They were making their money from shooting three. They weren't doing a lot of inside work, whereas Utah State, that's all they did. And I know there's a lot of
True.
talk about that discrepancy.
True.
Someone even mentioned Bam Adebayo being embarrassed by how many how many times that Utah State went to the free throw line. I thought that was cute. But yeah, there was a big discrepancy in that. That's a lot. All right,
I did want to mention Miami of Ohio, and I think the last game we should at least talk about is Santa Clara, Kentucky, because that was an incredible game. But Miami of Ohio, you know the deal, 31 and 0. They lost to Akron in the tournament, in their tournament, and it was like, well, that other team never gets in, but they're 31 and 0. And I did see the head of the selection committee, and he was saying, they were first, he said they were the last one in of that Final Four, but then he had to correct himself later. They were the first of the Final Four to get in. However, they figure these things out. Now, they did beat SMU in that 11-11 game. Um, but boy, Tennessee just, that's the problem, I think, with these. I'm not talking about High Point, but certainly Miami of Ohio. Tennessee out rebounds Miami of Ohio 42 to 25. Tennessee gets more points in the paint over Miami of Ohio, 40 to 16, Joe. This wasn't a game. I watched that game, and they hit some threes at the beginning to maybe give you some hope that it could be a game. But Miami of Ohio is down 19 and a half at the half. They lose by 22. It was never a game. But I still think they should, if you can go 31 and 0 and you're in Division One. Now the High Point coach said, well, look at us. The two of us are now 2 and 0 against quant ones or whatever that the higher echelon schools, and he's right. But now they're 2 and 1 with a blowout loss to Tennessee, and we'll see what happens to High Point because they got a pretty good team. But the final game to talk about, maybe we should have talking about it earlier, is Santa Clara at Kentucky. A lot of people gave Santa Clara, a good chance to win the game, and I'm sure you saw this. This was like the game from a figure out what happened perspective. Um, Alan Graves hits a three-pointer to put Santa Clara up three with 2.4 seconds left. Nobody calls timeout. Otega Oweh is the star of Kentucky. He had 35 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists. But he gets the ball. He's going up. You could see another guy going like this, to give me the ball, and he's like, no, no, no. I'm going to say it was like 10 feet past the half court line. I mean, this was not like even a long three. This was a beyond a long three. But he hit a bank shot. Thankfully, he admitted he didn't call bank. But who cares because that tied up the game, and then Kentucky won in overtime by 5. And um, Otega Oweh, 35 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists. Only one other player, and unfortunately they didn't say who it was. I didn't have time to look it up. Only one other player has had 35, 5, and 5 in an NCAA game since 1990. Don't know who that other player is. We'll try and find out for next week.
Pretty impressive stuff. All right, let's do it. We're here. We've gathered. Let's time to pick our final four teams and maybe crown a national champion. You want to go first?
Well, yeah, I'll go first. I'll give you a final four. I got Arizona, Michigan. So those are two number ones. But then I picked two threes, Michigan State and Illinois. Again, I watched so much of the Big Ten. I don't know how many teams are in the Big Ten. That would be a good trivia question now, right? How many teams are in the Big 12? How many teams are in the Big Ten in football and
No
basketball?
idea.
But I'm going Final Four: Arizona, Michigan, Michigan State, Illinois, and I got Arizona winning the whole thing. Um, but again, Illinois is kind of a Patriots pick for me in the Super Bowl because I've watched them play. I mean, they could beat anybody in the country, but they can lose to a lot of people as well, which is why I'm a little concerned in terms of VCU. I think Illinois is a double-digit favorite, but I don't know. After what VCU did, you got to be wary of them. Although I was sure Illinois could beat North Carolina.
All right, I got in the East. I got the Johnnies coming out. I know they're a 5 seed, but I didn't like
Yeah,
what
that's
I
a good
saw from
pick, I
Duke.
think. Yeah,
And UConn doesn't match up well against them apparently because the Johnnies have their way with them. So, and they're coached by Rick Pitino. It's not like a fluke coach. So,
that's
I'll go the
right.
Johnnies in the Midwest. I've liked Michigan all year. I know they lost that game to Duke, that marquee game a few weeks ago. In the South, I'm going Houston, looking to avenge a title game lost last year to Florida. And in the West, not to not wear my heart on my sleeve, but I'm going the Miami Hurricanes. I went into Missouri last night. Okay, playing a road game, a 7 seed versus a 10, and they came out
Yep.
pretty strong. They got a guard, Trey Don. They got three seniors first of all who start. I like teams in the tournament with experience, like they're more mature. You do have two freshmen, but Trey Donaldson. If I didn't know any better, I thought it's Malachi Tony out there. Playing guard. He was tremendous yesterday. 17 points. I'm gonna say that's my kind of like my Cinderella team to go to the Final Four. In the end, though, I gotta go. I gotta go with the victors valiant Michigan. I think that I like the way they're coached. I like the way they play. They've had some scares and they've had some losses this year. It might be learning lessons to Duke earlier in the year that monster matchup. So those are my squads: Miami, Michigan, St. John's, Houston, and Michigan coming out on top.
So, Joe, I'd like to go 90 seconds with a football thing because
Sure.
it's kind of sad and I should have done it. And it was remiss in not doing it last week. But Matt Snell of the Jets passed away last week at the age of 84. And he was the star of Super Bowl III. I know they gave Joe Namath the MVP, but I think Joe Namath, is he the only guy? Maybe there was one other guy who didn't throw a touchdown pass in the Super Bowl.
I'm not
Don't
sure he
get me
completed. I'm not sure he completed a pass in the fourth quarter of that game.
Now again, Namath was the leader. We guarantee it. Blah blah blah. He's a great quarterback, incredible athlete. I think I told you when they did a thing on him. Bear Bryant had said he was the best athlete I ever coached, and they asked Joe Namath, and he said, "Well, you notice he didn't say I was the best football player I ever coached." And this is before he ripped up his knees in college. I mean,
Yeah.
back then you didn't get operated. But Matt Snell 141 rushing yards, the only touchdown in the game, late in the game. And again, you'd have to go watch this game to see how valuable he was from beginning to end. Late in the game, they just gave him the ball like 5 or 6 times in a row, and they knew he was going to run, but he got the key first down to kill time. Much as I think Joe Namath was one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, I know you got, not you, but people have stats against that. But when you saw Joe Namath threw dinks and dunks in that game. I thought to Don Maynard and others and stuff like that.
Played it
And
safe.
he was the leader of the team, but I'll never forget the Jets were up 16-0 in that game. And Namath years later, well, Johnny Yu came in and he scored a touchdown and we were all worried. But back then, as you know, it was 16-7. So if they came down and scored again, it would be 16-14. There was no way you were catching them unless you had three scores in the
Right, you
fourth
don't have
quarter.
didn't have the 2 point conversion back then.
Exactly. So I take nothing away from Namath. I still think he's one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. You can tell me all about his interceptions. I'll say it forever. When he threw for 4,007 yards in 14 games, first guy to break 4,000, that would be like 5,500 or 6,000
You
today.
don't have to tell
Uh,
me he was my guy growing up.
right. And he was half a cripple his whole time. And the stuff he did to his legs, uh, you just couldn't really deal with, but he dealt with it. So whatever. It's just sad. Matt Snell, 84 years old. Um, I'm pretty sure not a Hall of Famer, maybe in the Jets Hall of Fame. But that day, that game, he was the bull, and he had some real good runs. Again, he scored the only touchdown in the game for the Jets. Obviously, Johnny Yu scored
He was
one
Timmy
touchdown.
Smith before Timmy Smith. I mean, he had that one game.
I think that's a good analogy, but I really thought, and I watched that game. I was a kid, but I watched that game. I thought he was clearly the MVP. But Joe Namath is Joe Namath. I'm sure that helped get him the MVP.
You know who I like from that team, and because I got to know him a little bit when I worked PR for the Virginia Slims women's tennis tournament. I know completely unconnected.
Wow.
Johnny Sample. Johnny Sample, known as one of the dirty players back then of his era, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, and he's covering women's tennis like it is autumn years. Got to know him because we had a lot of time to sit around and kibitz. Really awesome dude. I know he passed away since, but him regaling me stories of that game. I mean, with a live person instead of reading things about, he was in that game, and he was the nicest guy. It's a lot of times, like Andre Waters, known as Dirty Waters, nicest guy too. A lot of the nicest guys were known as the dirtiest players. He was so cool. Had a big hand in winning that game. Buddy Ryan too was an assistant coach in that game as well, believe it or not. But yeah, Matt Snell certainly, I thought as well. Everything I've read on that game, obviously I was like 2 years old, was the MVP of that game. Good stuff, my brother. And we got a whole slew of games coming up today, and then some tomorrow, and so it should be fun. And we'll take us to next week. By next week, we will know the Final Four after Sunday. Games resume on Thursday, and we'll have another podcast for you on Saturday. So good stuff, Steve. You can catch Steve's stuff on daily on his Facebook forum page. Speaking of sports with Steve Kallas. Also, this podcast on YouTube or all the audio outlets, and you can follow me on Instagram at Joe Stazak 4799 or on Twitter at Joe Stazak 975. Good stuff, my friend. Enjoy the games today. I'm sure we'll be texting about the various goings on, but having a great weekend. Enjoy yourself.
Always a pleasure, Joe.
Appreciate it, folks. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.